Hello and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this week we are back on the Acolyte Appetite, where we're talking about episode number 6, Teach/Corrupt, directed by Hanelle Culpepper and written by Leslye Headland and Jocelyn Bioh. And let me tell you, speaking of Acolyte Appetite, Sarah, we were served not like a 3-course meal.
Divorce
we were served
papers.
we were you have been served.
Yeah.
We were served a 6-course meal, and then just when we thought we were done, like we get like a little bit of dessert, a little cup of coffee to, cleanse our palates. We were just feasting. We left this episode bellies full. You got to unbutton the top button of your pant. So,
I was like
you can
naming
let the belly,
the food baby at this point. I was like, this is my child.
Got to make
My
a little
food
extra
baby.
room for the food baby.
Right.
We ate. We came out of this victorious. How are you feeling? We have a lot to talk about.
Feeling good. Feeling good. Yup. We do have a lot to talk about.
Let's just full disclosure, spoilers ahead. I don't think there's anything we can really say that's non-spoiler related. This episode's great.
We say this every time as if people who are listening to this podcast think it's going to be a non-spoiler discussion, but we spoil things every time. So I feel like, audience, obviously we're going to talk about spoilers.
And yet there would be one person out there who would listen and be like, gosh darn it, those Friends of the Force spoiled this episode.
You know what?
Me.
That's fair. That's fair. We're here for that one person. We love you. We support you. Go watch the episode. You'll like it.
Yeah. Okay, let's dive into it. Let's just go right in. We got a lot to cover, but first and foremost, right up front, enemies to lovers, official canon, overtly in Star Wars, we are eating fine. It feels like we're back in December 2017, the Raylo of it all. We got Osha and Qimir. The ship has sailed. We're not getting off this boat anytime soon. Going into this episode, coming out of last week, we kind of felt maybe there would be something there, and then kind of the lead up to the episode, we had the Star Wars account posting the Manny article and a Manny fan cam, and we had a week full of Manny fan cams, by the way. People talking about Qimir is the new ship name, and then this episode was just let's open the gates. The floodgates are open. Everything is just there out for the people. We got a bare naked man in Star Wars. We got lightsaber innuendos, a lot of things going on. Yeah.
So first of all, I would like to put a request out to anybody listening who might also be a K-pop fan. I would really personally I don't know how to do fan cams. I'm like a granny. I can't do memes. I can't do fan cams. I'm not good enough for any of that.
Like a granny. What does that make me, huh?
You can do memes.
I know, but in terms of age,
you're
come on.
good at making memes. I can't make memes. I can't do fan cam. I can't do this. Anyway, point being, if you're also a K-pop fan, there's this aespa song called Supernova. And this is part where one of the members goes, body bang. And if you know what I'm talking about, then you know what I'm talking about. I want a Qimir fan cam to the body bang part of Supernova. And I know that sounds so weird if you don't know what I'm talking about. But if you know, you know. And if you don't, you should go listen to aespa's Supernova and Armageddon. They're both really good songs, very catchy. Anyway, I just would really like that, please. Somebody in the universe. And I have no idea what the question you asked me was. Actually, I just really needed to get that off my chest.
It's how are you feeling? We're having full blown enemies to lovers storyline in a Star Wars.
Yeah,
who would have thunk?
Who would have thunk? I'm feeling good. I'm feeling content. Mandy Jacinto is very good looking, I'm not going to say no to that. And Amanda Stenberg is incredible and gorgeous. I'm not going to say no to this. I love a good dynamic, and enemies to lovers is a good dynamic.
This might have been the hottest episode of any Star Wars TV show. Definitely TV. I mean, movies is up for debate potentially, but this is up there in the pantheon of hot Star Wars.
On the pantheon of hot, I did go back and watch Obi-Wan episode 6 the other day because I was just thinking about great performances. And we are on Mustafar and the lava is flowing. So in terms of hotness,
valid.
Right. So like there, it has a little bit of I can't even finish my joke. No, I think you're right.
As much as I want to say too, this was the first time we've seen a fully naked person in Star Wars. I realized on Twitter today that we've seen Han Solo in the shower with Chewbacca. So we can't say that Qimir, you were the first, but Qimir, you are the first to openly invite somebody to go skinny dipping in a Star Wars. So like take that one as a win. Take that in your W column.
Right. Yeah, and I we could say that the Han Solo Chewbacca shower moment wasn't built to evoke the same feeling, as the Qimir skinny dipping moment.
Right. That was like two dudes chilling in the shower, 5 feet apart, passing the shampoo bottle. You know what I mean? Like,
right. I mean, those are just guys. They're just guys being bros,
Yeah, trying to clean out the clogged drain of hair,
Right. And that's important. That's important, right?
Yeah.
This was a little bit more. This was a little more. There was a little more in it.
I felt, and we'll like dive into the details. We'll kind of go through the episode and like some of the pivotal moments, but like talking.
No,
largely,
we're not. We're just gonna go the whole time.
Incoherent thoughts. I feel like the farther into this episode we got, it was just that kind of moment of realization of, oh, they're leaning in, because I think, we're Reylos, right? Like we love the Rey and Kylo dynamic of the sequel trilogy. And I think
that's right.
The sequel trilogy, I think in some ways left just enough room where if you didn't interpret it that way, that was fine. That's just how you interpreted it. But it also had enough there that if you wanted to ship those two characters and you wanted it to be that, you wanted to have a focus on that, like you could. But I feel like this was just so overt and so clearly like the line that, the guy at the airport with the little light up glow sticks, like
that's
Lucasfilm was like, and Leslye Headland was like, no, this is it. This is the ship you get on. This is the story. And she's openly acknowledged that,
Right. I think maybe the most key difference is that Leslye is openly saying, this is what my intention was. This is what we're doing here. Whereas with Reylo, it was a lot of the fans saying, Reylo fans being like, this is here. This is here. This is here. Do you not see that? And again, if you're not a shipper, if you don't like shipping, if you don't like either the Qimir or Reylo pairing, then that's like totally fine and valid. And like, I support you in your fandom endeavors. Shipping or not shipping, all of the above is valid. But I think a lot of the Reylo fans were like, this is clearly a dynamic at play based on X, Y, and Z in literature and film and television, and also tropes and these sorts of things. And then nobody official ever said really anything about it. And there was this sense in the fandom that it was like really, really kind of looked down upon to ship Reylo in some spaces online and those sorts of things. So I think the key difference is that it's being acknowledged very clearly, very openly. Also, shout out to past me, who was so in on it. I wrote a paper in college on Jane and Rochester in Jane Eyre and Rey and Kylo. And then 6 months later, Tross came out and crushed all of my hopes and dreams personally and professionally. And by professionally, I mean in my hobby of Star Wars. There's no money involved here.
Yeah. And I think the cool thing between like Reylo and Qimir too, I think is there's some very close similarities, but there's also a lot of things that make these two dynamics so much different than the other. And that's the cool thing, right? And like to your point, I think The Last Jedi really took it there. And there was a lot of subtext for Reylo. Like you could read it in the subtext, but I feel like this is the capital T text of this show, right? Sure. It's that seduction to the dark side, right? And we had that great interview with Manny right before this episode dropped of like, what if we explored that? What if we explored the dark side from a point of view of like empathy? And we had kind of mentioned that at the end of our last episode was like, maybe those things that May told Osha she could never have with the Jedi, that love, friendship, and family, like those are the things that Qimir could offer her. And that's exactly what he was doing in this episode. He was being vulnerable. He was being inviting. And whether or not you believe his intentions are genuine, like I do think to some degree, this is a part of Qimir that at his heart he is, with still some malicious intent in there as well. Like he wants something, clearly, right? Like he wants the power of two. He wants that pupil. But at the same time, I do think a lot of what he's saying is correct. Though? From the point of view of a Jedi,
is him having
yes.
a purpose malicious? Is him having an intention malicious? Like I question, because we know Qimir is so good at character, you know, like the Qimir kind of aloof character to the way he switches between vocal inflections in episode 5 to now, like each of these is a little bit different. Like I could see the seeds of doubt. Like, is he very intentionally and consciously manipulating her by putting on another character? But I also think that it's possible that he's not at all.
Yeah, and when I say like malice, I think it's from the point of view of what a Jedi would think his intentions are, right? Like the Jedi would say, oh, this is malicious. But a lot of the points that he makes throughout the episode are not entirely untrue. And it's his lived experience, you know? And I think there is this great quote from Leslye about like how the best villains are the ones that make you like form opinions. This was in the Collider article from our friend Maggie Lovett, which we're going to allude to throughout this discussion, and we'll include a link in the description. You should go check it out. But yeah, the quote was, "The scariest villains are the ones you agree with. Those are the scariest ones." To me, it forces you to create an opinion, which I think, listen, in any day and age, everyone's got one and shouts it very loudly. And so like that to me is like what Qimir is. Qimir is making these points of like, and you kind of question like, do I trust him? Do I not trust him? Oh, that's a good point. Oh, that's not such a good point. And you kind of go back and forth and you're really not sure entirely what to make of him, but you're also not entirely distrusting of him. And that's also the position Osha is in. She's like just enough curiosity to not want to kill him in such a vulnerable state, but she wants to keep hearing what he's got to say. That's the seduction of the dark side. It's Palpatine going, "Have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?" And Anakin being like,
"No,
I kind of do want to hear. Oh, the Jedi wouldn't tell me. I do want to hear that actually.
Oh, interesting.
You know,
yeah.
And we've heard that seduction word used in episode 4. You know, Vader was seduced by the dark side, by Obi-Wan. You know, 1977 we're using that word, and here we are really like exploring that nuance. You want to talk about our location and setting first before we dive into that discussion? Talk about this unknown place.
This is why you lead the conversation, bestie. Love you for that. It's not Octo, guys. Let's be sad together. Let's have a moment of sadness. Aww. Thank you.
No porg. I thought I heard a porg in the background of one of the scenes. I was like, oh, porg.
When I tell you, when we heard that little like clap, clap, clap or whatever, I was like, let it be a porg. Let it be a porg. Let it be a porg. I swear to God, I would like to do porg capitalism again. Okay. I have the porg tag saved on Mercari, but some resellers out here are like, I would like to charge $65 for this porg plushie. And I'm like, no, you bought that for $10.99 at Walmart 6 years ago or whatever. Maybe 7 years ago.
It's been a long time. We're coming up on the 10th of TLJ, by the way. It's coming soon.
LOL. Anyway, it wasn't a porg. I was really devastated. But my whole like theory, I think I've talked about this in past episodes. It's like, okay, Vernestra says that May was clearly, obviously trained by a Jedi. And then at the same time, in episode 5, I think, or 4, one of the two, they're the same episode, they're just split up into 2 different weeks. Episode 5, Yord is like, his movements are erratic, he doesn't play by the rules of combat. So it's like, okay, well, is he trained by a Jedi or is he not trained by a Jedi? Or you know, is it a Jedi or is it not a Jedi? And so my thought was, okay, if he's not a Jedi, then he clearly is studying from the same sources. And that's where I thought that Octo would have been a really compelling place to go, because it's like, oh, well, the Sith have the same access to these foundational texts as the Jedi, and yet he's reading them and taking a completely different interpretation of them. And I thought that would have been really compelling. And I still don't think that that's necessarily out of the picture, but now we do know that he was a Jedi, which low key I think is the slightly less interesting option. Not to like I don't know. If you look at world religions, there are multiple world religions that are foundational to the same figures and the same stories, right? Like the character of like these characters throughout the Bible also show up in other texts, or these same stories. Like there's a reason why there's locations in the world that are central to multiple religions. Anyway, I just think that would have been a really interesting way to go for this new resurgence of the Sith. But whatever. I'm not writing the show, so it's fine.
Yeah, and we'll dive a little bit more into that as well. I do like that angle though, because I think when you have like these two characters who feel like they failed within that institution, right, and were maybe wronged by it, I think that makes for a really compelling story of like, oh, totally. We were both wronged by the system. You know, this is a story about underdogs versus institution. Here are the two underdogs who were exiled from said institution, said power structure in the galaxy. So it's like, how can we upheave that? How can we flip it on its head and actually achieve that freedom that we desire? Like the freedom from those shackles, the freedom from how we're told the Force should be used by this one monolith, by this one institution. And maybe you and I can have that power of two and use the Force in any way that we see fit. But without jumping too far ahead, we can come back to that. But I do want to just shout out like your point about Octo. I like the imagery was so clear of this potentially being Octo. This was so actually Ireland. Filmed. Yeah, this was filmed in the Portuguese island of Madeira. And I just love that we're getting more on location shooting. You know, we had Skellig Island for Octo, and now we have this Portuguese island. And I just thought that was really cool that we're really utilizing on location shooting. I think that's so important because often it feels like Star Wars TV has been kind of claustrophobic inside the volume and not very like open worldly in some sense. So I really like that we got that here. I am of the opinion now. I will not get off of this train until it crashes and burns. That this planet, the quote unquote unknown planet, and Octo are in the same system. Okay, our little dudes are cute little guys. Those are relatives of the Thalassirans. Okay, yeah, little slightly different evolutionary path. Same source. Yeah, the Skura, who are part anteater, part duck, they do look just like the Thalassiren, like so close.
Yeah, I'm really going to hang on to this theory until it crashes and burns. I refuse to let it go.
I mean, there's like headcanon you can have, and until proven otherwise, like that can remain your headcanon. Like you've been saying these are in the same system, so they are. As far as you care about.
I mean, I hang on to my headcanon sometimes, even if they are completely disproven. I don't need to follow the canon. I'm here for a good time. And that the best time I can make is the one that I make up, you know? Like if I did decide, not in my canon, actually, that's fine. It's just for me. You know?
But I do love being on this island, this tropical place, where, you know, you have these pristine beaches, you know, these big rock cliff areas. I think they're just such clear parallels to The Last Jedi with Rey going to Octo. Even the outfits that Rey and Osha are wearing are both like gray.
What's up with the cold shoulder moment? The cold shoulder, I was like, I know you. I've seen you before. Turns on TLJ. The gray cold shoulder moment.
So you're talking when like Qimir is like walking away from her, ignoring her?
The style when the shoulder is cut out of the outfit is the cold shoulder.
Got it.
So yeah, Rey also has cold shoulders in her Octo outfit, and Osha does too. Qimir picked out the outfit, and he's like, you know what goes with the rocks? A cold shoulder cropped sweatshirt.
He's got a sense of style, I have to admit. Like,
I know,
man
she looks
dresses
cute.
well. Yeah.
She looks cute. He looks cute. Everybody's looking cute.
Yeah, but like the TLJ of it all in this episode was really just felt, I don't know, it felt like, again, we were back in 2017 and there's just so many good bits to chew on. But in terms of what this planet could be, I know some people have been speculating that it's a planet called Baldemnik, which is actually from Legends. Specifically, it appears in the Plagueis novel. And it was this place that is described very similarly with its features, but it eventually fell to the control of the Sith Lords Darth Tenebrous and Darth Plagueis because it had this rich deposit of cortosis. And Leslye also confirmed that this planet is where cortosis is mined from. So could be the same planet. We know that Leslye loves the EU and loves Legends, so her pulling in more things from Legends is like really enticing. And I love the idea that we have a planet that's much like Octo, and this is sort of like the dark side Octo, whereas we have the light side Octo with the tree. Yeah, like balance. It's that yin and yang imagery of, these two planets that coexist together. Who knows? Like maybe Octo is just like off in the distance in the sky,
That's what I'm saying.
But yeah, just some really cool stuff. And if that ends up being Baldemnik, more power to you, Leslye. Let's keep doing it. Keep bringing in some cool legend stuff.
I also just find it objectively funny that his ship is like a little ways away on another tiny island. He's like, well, you can wait until the tide goes out. Like, is Qimir stuck on his island on said unknown planet when it's high tide? Like, it just doesn't seem that convenient. Like, I recognize he's kind of a recluse and I recognize that he's trying not to be found. But like, if he's got to go to the galactic grocery store or if he's got to go kill some Jedi, he's got to get out of there pretty quick, I would imagine. Like if the grocery store closes at midnight and it's 11 p.m., he can't just like wait for 2 hours for the tide to go out. I actually thought about this, not the grocery store specifically, but I actually thought about this when I was watching the episode. I was like, wait a second, he doesn't have like a pedestrian bridge? Seriously?
Yeah. Speaking of grocery store, by the way, I think it was mentioned in the StarWars.com article that like Manny would go to his local market and stay in character and like practice his Qimir lines. Like, just imagine you being a grocery store attendant and you have Manny Jacinto come up to you and he's just like, hello, I'd like to buy these tomatoes. Just this like silly little guy. You're just like, okay. Why are you talking like that?
Or alternatively, like in his kind of dark side voice, which is very flat and low in his pitch. Like, like that'd be a little spooky. You'd be like, can I get a half a pound of the ham?
But yeah, we start this episode with Osha waking up in his little apartment, as I'll call it. Immediately my mind went and said, oh God, there's a bathtub right there. Oh God, what's happening? But I also want to point out that we again see Osha waking up, and we've seen, I think in almost every episode, we've seen Osha wake up. And I just, again, have to keep banging this drum. It's intentional. I don't know exactly what they're going for, but like my idea is that we've seen the Force kind of coming back to the forefront of her consciousness. She is having this like literal awakening within herself. And it almost feels like her waking up moment in each episode has been getting progressively more and more gentler. Like the first episode, she is startled awake, like fearful. She is like heavy breathing when she wakes up. This one, it's more of like a slower, groggier kind of waking up where it seems like she's well rested. And I almost feel like maybe she's becoming more at peace within herself and finding a balance that she has been lacking for so long because she hasn't been continued her training, right? It's like that idea of like, does the Force fade? And I think the Force is just literally awakening within her again. And that's like kind of why we keep seeing her in these moments.
Yeah, I think your theory, you've kind of been on this since the beginning of her waking up, being intentional and thoughtful, is so interesting. And you're right, it does seem to get a little gentler each time. Yeah, I'm now just watching that scene like on the other screen, and you really got me thinking there. I like it. I like your thoughts.
The Force Awakens.
You know, speaking of The Force Awakens, there's a moment of this will make things right. And I was like pointing at the screen, and my mom was, you know, sitting there, and I was like, Mom, stop looking at your phone. I have something to tell you. And then I backed out of the Acolyte, and then I clicked onto TFA, and I said, give me a minute. I said, this is the first line of the entire sequel trilogy, Mom.
You know, I have to say, speaking of Laura Santeca, there is still a possibility we get a Kazerath device in the show. I'm on board. I'm on board now.
Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, I think so too.
Let's keep being delusional together.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. It's just a device that needs a dark side user and a light side user to use it together. What does it do? I don't know. But
let's find out.
It's so important to me.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody's going to pull a really obscure thing from a comic book, it's Leslye, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
And how dare you call my interests obscure?
Obscure in the sense that it has one image on Wikipedia, and like that's all we've seen of it. It's like,
yeah, but I keep trying to work this in the sense of like, okay, here it is. Like Qimir, he used to be like a smuggler for the Hutts, and you know, maybe he dealt with artifacts, and you know, maybe the Kazerath device. And I'm like, well, he's like a bad guy on this island, and maybe the Kazerath device. Like, it will come into here. We need the light side and the dark side. You know, the light side is a choice. I don't know. Yeah, I think that Osha being in this space and being in this cave, his apartment, wonder what the rent is, on the remote island. It's really interesting because this is also another very, very famous, popular enemies to lovers ship. Is Phantom of the Opera and Christine and the Phantom, and like literally a whole entire piece of that show is him bringing her to his like lair under the opera house, and they're in the same space, and she's curious about him. Like, you know, like I'm like, I've been here before.
She wakes up in his bed. Where is she supposed to sleep? We got a one bed trope already going. Like, is he going to sleep on the floor? Is he going to be like, make some room for me? I'm not sleeping on the floor. Well, I got a bad back from killing all those Jedi.
Right. And I think that, you know, as you're saying, every time she wakes up, it gets a bit gentler. The final boss here is just like cuddling, you know, like
boss. What's the better way to sleep than with a nice warm bosom, you know, being the big spoon? Nothing better, you know.
But like, what, you know, you're gonna wake up and you're just like, oh, I'm comfortable, I'm happy, like, and that's the cuddles.
Do you think Qimir sleeps with the helmet on or helmet off? If he sleeps with the helmet on and he snores, like imagine all of his snores are just like the like.
People are gonna turn off this episode and thinking about that. They're gonna think about that and be like,
She's like, can you stop breathing so loud in your sleep? It's really distracting.
Who sleeps with a helmet on? Like that's, I mean, Darth Vader.
Kylo sleeps with the helmet on 100%.
No way.
Yeah.
No
Fully
way.
Naked Kylo, but only helmet.
No.
And his like little
agree.
First Order bed that we see in Last Jedi.
Don't agree. I think he keeps it on his bedside table, and he sleeps facing his bedside table so he can look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got to be able to have a, like, he wants to feel the pillow on his head. You know, think about your neck if you're like having to compensate for the mask.
Yeah, but like my thought is like the helmet for Qimir is free noise canceling, sensory deprivation. That's the like quietest sleep you've ever had. If you put that thing on,
right? But that's
like,
not comfortable. Oh. Like maybe if you're like an astronaut in 0G space and like you just get, you know what I'm talking about? You get into a little astronaut pod and like you have to strap yourself in so you don't go floating away while you sleep. Maybe if you don't have to lay down functionally anywhere. But like if you have to lay down, think about how the mask is built. It's not meant to be a sleep mask.
Okay. Maybe he's got sleep apnea. What do you have against sleep apnea, Sarah? Like maybe he's got to get some oxygen, in his nostrils so he can not choke. in his sleep.
Well, if you like need some extra oxygen or the CPAP, there are like wedge pillows or whatever. But it's still not going to help if you're putting on a full mask over your head and then like it flares out at the end. So like I'm sorry.
All right, fair. We'll leave it to people's headcanon to decide.
If anybody's still listening at this point.
Yeah, let's leave this tangent cave that we've found ourselves in and let's go outside into the real world. And here we have Osha, discovering where she is, the sort of serenity of this place, and she follows Qimir, who is like pretending like he didn't know she was there. He's just, I'm just going for a little walk. I didn't know you were there.
He's just a little guy.
Yeah. Very Luke of him, right? Because like Luke in Last Jedi is ignoring Rey and he's like going fishing and just pretending she's not there. So I kind of liked that a little bit. But Osha follows him to this small swimming area where there are some maybe like salt springs or something kind of thing going on. And oh boy, Qimir strips naked. I thought we were getting ass. I thought we were getting an ass in Star Wars. I was like, oh my God. We're
you
getting
really
butt
thought
cheeks.
we were going to see an entire booty in
I thought
in the Star Wars?
I thought we were getting butt cheeks for a minute. I was like, holy crap. And then they cut away. I was like, okay, they're not brave enough for butt cheeks.
I didn't think we were going to get nudity at all. I thought he was going to take off that tunic and wait it in the skirt. Honestly. Honestly, I was like, Star Wars is not bold enough for this. But like, yeah, no, they did it.
What was your reaction when he started like undressing and going into the swimming area? Like, were you just like, what am I watching? Am I hallucinating right now? Like, what is going on?
Well, actually, I kept being like back scar.
True.
I was like, no. I don't need the shot of his feet walking into the pool. I want the back scar. Show me his back. And so that was really most curious to me. And I think I was a little bit shocked at the nudity at all, but I was also so focused on this scar on his back. And I also was thinking about how the cosplayers would be really excited about seeing him take this costume off and understand where the fastenings are and like how it is put on. That's what I was thinking about. And then I was also thinking about his shoulders. I'll be really honest with you. He's got incredible shoulders. So
really? I did love that shot from behind where he like undresses. I thought that was like just the contour of his body. I was like, dang, that guy's ripped. Holy moly.
He's definitely put a lot of work into his muscles and shout out 10 out of 10. Great work. His traps are also really impressive.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm now watching this scene.
Speaking of traps, is this a trap? But in all seriousness, 100%. Elzar Mann walked so that Qimir could run, is all I will say. If there's any episode where I have to mention a pantsless Elzar Mann, it's this one, because now we've gotten not only a pantsless Qimir, but a fully unclothed Qimir. And I love that for us. I love that evolution of the High Republic.
I just need to call up Leslye personally and condemn her for this choice, because Brad will never shut up about this from now until the end of time. And I thought that an Elzar Mann, pantsless Elzar Mann was enough. And the fact that Brad has to mention it every other business day.
Objectively hilarious. That's why.
Every other business day.
So
good. I thought I'll never be free, and now I will truly never be free.
No, never. But speaking of Qimir being unclothed, again, this article from Collider, she talks about Leslye talks about how being naked was necessary, and the quote is, quote, "He did like a Steven Seagal neck snap in the previous episode. How do you at all get from that to humanity? The only way to do that is to show him in such a wildly vulnerable position, and it has to be visual. I mean, I can't think of something more vulnerable than someone holding a lightsaber on someone who's that exposed," end quote. And that's it. That's perfect. It's like a perfect summation of why this scene is the way it is, because like he leaves everything, knowing Osha is following him. He leaves his lightsaber, he leaves his clothes. He is saying, if you want to strike me down, you can. You have that choice. You can do it right here and right now. He says to her, "You're wondering if it's honorable to kill me like this. Heat of battle, it's justified, but a few hours later, it's vengeance. And now you're wondering how I can read your mind. I can't, right?"
Can I jump back just to the beginning of that? Isn't this the challenge for May all along? To kill an unarmed person. I mean, without a weapon. is the goal, and she's been killing people with weapons, and this would have been a weapon kill as well or whatever. But like, hasn't this been the whole goal? And how close can maybe Qimir push Osha in this vulnerable moment to see how close to it she's willing to get? But she won't. But he knows she won't do it because she's too curious about what he has to say, and also she kind of needs him in order to leave. Theoretically, he holds the information, about where they are and what the goal is. But yeah, I mean, I agree with the comment that Leslye made about how do you go from this like really scary kind of inhuman sort of figure to empathizing with him or rooting for him or understanding him better, and it's like making him super super vulnerable, and nudity was the way to do that, which makes a lot of sense to me as a viewer, and to the character. It also reminds me of TLJ, and when I really got turned on to Kylo Ren as a character, like I wasn't a TFA Reylo, and I wasn't like a TFA Kylo fan a ton either. It was TLJ once he walks into that throne room, right? And Snoke is just chiding him and going after him and being like, you're just a loser. And you see the emotion on his face. You finally see the vulnerability under the mask, and then he smashes the fuck out of that mask, which is like my Super Bowl. That's my Roman Empire. I think about it all the time. It's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm so serious about it.
I think about that all the time whenever I see that scene now, because that was like one of the first things you had said when we started podcasting together. I was like, I can never unsee that. Like, that's your sports moment.
It's my sports moment. Yeah. I love that. And so we were getting a different version of that. How can we empathize with him or understand him differently? And it's just make him super, super vulnerable. And for Kylo, that was emotionally. And for Qimir, that's quite physically.
Yeah, visually, yeah. And also the fact that Qimir had never shown his face to May. So now not only is he telling Osha and signaling to Osha, hey.
No, he sleeps in the mask. Yeah, no, you're right. Actually, he does sleep in the mask because May's, those are May's clothes, are they not?
Yeah, maybe they slept in the same area, potentially.
Yeah.
But he's signaling to Osha, not only am I willing to unmask, I'm willing to show you capital E everything about me.
Right.
Like, you know a lot about a person by just they're naked. You see every curve, everything. So I think that was a moment for him to say, there's nothing I am willing to hide from you. I'm being fully open, and I will tell you what you want to know as long as you have the courage to ask and the courage to also be truthful to yourself in that questioning. Like, don't pretend like you're not in denial. Don't pretend like you don't have these emotions. Like, open yourself up just like I am to you. And I love that he says, like, when she picks up the saber, feels good, doesn't it, to hold one in your hand again? One of the many innuendos that this episode starts to play with is all I will say.
The innuendo goes crazy in this episode.
Yeah. But if you just see that quote out of context, you're just like, huh? What does that mean?
Can I also highlight like in that moment when she crouches down and goes to pick up that saber, there is very low in the mix, the audio mix, a sort of whooshing sound as she picks it up. It's like I can only hear it if I'm really listening for it, but it's like it feels like everything is coming into focus as she picks it up, and I just want to highlight that. Whoever mixed this episode, I heard it.
Well, it's the first time she's picked up a lightsaber in how many years, right? Probably 6 years. So it's been a minute. And I love that he's already like, your stance is good, but keep your elbow up higher. It allows for a swifter block.
Yeah, he's instructing her.
Which I was having war flashbacks to baseball practice. Like, keep that shoulder up, keep that elbow up.
I was not thinking about sports. He's wearing a baseball ball cap right now.
I know. It's a Yankees hat.
It's a Yankees hat.
Really came prepared.
Yeah. He's also wearing a t-shirt that has to do with sports as well.
Yeah, it's a US Open shirt.
Yep.
Wimbledon's happening right now.
Tennis.
Different Grand Slam.
Right, than Denny's.
Mm-hmm. It's all connected.
It's all connected. I, on the other hand, am wearing a plain shirt, nothing on it. Very much like the close of this episode.
Qimir, on the other hand, no clothes.
No clothes. Right. That's right.
Yeah. I do want to point out again, though, just again, the color theory of this episode was so interesting because Osha puts on gray, right? So she's kind of teetering in the middle between black
gray
and white.
Jedi, Brad? Gray Jedi?
But when Qimir comes out, I thought it was so interesting that he doesn't put back on his black clothes. He has like a white shirt. And so now he, in some sense, like I kind of view it as he is showing the quote unquote light side of himself. He is showing that, again, that vulnerability, that more caring, gentler side of, I'm not a threat. I am the light. I'm just seeing things with more clarity than the Jedi do. And like, I'm kind of enlightened.
I think we could also like suggest that there's like a purifying of the, like he's doing this to wash away the dirt and the pain of the battle, right? Because you can tell that his arms are still dirty from the battle. So him entering this pool naked and then putting on lighter clothing could symbolize a sort of maybe the light, but like a purity of mind or clarity of mind as he goes into this rest of this discussion with her.
Makes me think of Elzar Mann at the beginning of The Rising Storm. Remember when he walks into the ocean because he sees the forest as a tide. And so he's sort of walking into the ocean to clear up his mind.
Right. The screams had never left Elzar Mann.
It's almost like it's like a baptism.
Because he could have put on black again, no problem. Nobody would have batted an eye at that. That would have been like a very natural choice to make.
Right.
So
very cool. Very cool. Like much to explore just with the costuming. I love that. You know, like the show is not doing these things without purpose. Right.
May and Osha being purple, all their marketing being purple throughout this whole thing. And then like the logo being red and blue. Let's be real.
Yeah. Yeah. Leslye actually made a comment about the color purple because she said purple often doesn't show up too much in Star Wars. It does, but you don't see major characters. You think of Zam Wessel wears purple. I cannot believe we got a Zam Wessel.
Did she say Zam Wessel wears purple?
Yeah, she did.
Oh my God. Leslye Headland for WrestleMania. I love that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she said Zam wears purple. Palpatine wears purple. It's kind of an unknowing like what are people's alliances and who are they? So yeah, there was a lot of thought put into who was going to be what. These things aren't accidents.
Right. I also want to highlight, I know we mentioned this a little bit, but when he's immediately instructing her, there's about her stance. There's a certain there's a clarity. I know I've said clarity a lot in the last 5 minutes, but there's a clarity to that in the sense that his advice is sound. And his advice is correct. And I think she probably knows it to be correct. And that might throw her off guard a little bit. Like, wait, I do know what you're saying to me. You're right. And also I want to highlight again, this is just a little bit later, in the episode when she's kind of like, what do you want? Just a tiny bit later. And he's like master and pupil. Again, I was talking a little bit last week about how he avoids the word apprentice, and I find that really curious, and I still find it curious, and I'm just putting a pin in it. Thank you.
Well, that's actually a great place to transition to their walk along the beach, and when he admits to being a Jedi, maybe him not using the word apprentice is a rejection of that kind of mold that the Jedi operate within, right? It's like, I'm done using these terms and these ideas. These are kind of flawed, dogmatic thinking. It's pupil, versus the word apprentice. Like maybe there's some more meaning behind the word pupil then, So I think that could be part of it.
There's a certain like equality or egalitarianism to the word pupil as opposed to apprentice. It feels like, at least contextually.
Mm-hmm.
And an apprentice suggests one level of expertise from one person and a lowered level of expertise from the learner.
Yes.
Whereas pupil suggests just a student. There's no
100%.
there's no implication on the teacher's level of expertise. And I've been thinking in the past that the rejection of the word apprentice meant that he was the apprentice. I don't know where I am on that theory as of this episode, if that makes sense. But the difference a little bit in the words apprentice and pupil is now something that I'm thinking about and what these words mean.
Right. And I'm looking up on Google here. It's like apprentice kind of implies employment in some sense. You know, working for a fixed period of time as an apprentice. So, you know, you think of apprenticeships, right? You do some sort of job. Yeah.
A leveling up.
So, you know, maybe that word carries the connotation of you are employed, but you're not learning. You're just kind of doing, perhaps. And you think of some of the Jedi apprentices, right? They're the ones that are in the libraries. They're doing research for their master, like Obi-Wan is doing for Qui-Gon, you know, looking up prophecies, #egg talk. And, you know, student kind of, like you said, it implies learning. It implies not necessarily starting at the beginning, but just learning, continuing to learn, building upon whatever foundation that you already have. So yeah, I think there's definitely intentionality there with the word choice.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Qimir being a Jedi, quote, a really long time ago. Emphasis on that, by the way. He says a long time ago, and then he says a really long time ago. And so that's what I want to ask you about is like, how long do we really think a really long time ago is? Because Osha doesn't know him. So it could have been right before she got to the temple. It could be around the time of the novels. You know, there is precedent for humans living hundreds of years. Look at Azan Rel, who tuned into the dark side to make it from phase 2 to phase 3 of the High Republic. Where are you at? Like, how old do you think Qimir truly is?
Can I share a theory that I've been thinking about?
Yes.
Okay, so we had the opportunity to join Alex and Molly on Star Wars Explained to talk about this episode. And somebody in the chat, I apologize that I did not flag this comment for who it was. But somebody in the chat said Comac Vitas. And I went, oh, whoa. I went, what if?
Your eyes bulged out of your head and you're like, whoa.
You know, I've been wondering where that man was, and maybe he, like Ong, got stuck in an iceberg and has been there for the past 100 years. Or the power of fear compelled him to live really long.
Needed him most, he vanished.
Right, and continue to be super high. I don't know. I feel like Qimir definitely has more muscles than Comac probably did. But I did hear that, and I was like, wait a second. I'm not saying that's not possible. I don't know. That's the really interesting thing to me. And this is something we had looked up in the past. So Amandla is 25, and the character that they're playing, I think, is like 21, 22-ish, right? Qimir, we don't know his age, but Manny Jacinto is in his late 30s. I think he's 38.
38, yeah.
And so there's like a decade and change age gap between the actors, which means that there could be anywhere from 2 to 20 years difference between their characters. You know what I'm saying? In the sense of like, sometimes the 30-year-olds play high schoolers and sometimes they're playing 2 years apart, but they're actually 15 years apart. Acting is weird. But yeah, I don't know. And I think we're being made to think that Qimir is a Padawan of Vernestra's and that the scar on his back is from the light whip. I'm not like ready to say that. And I think Qimir allows Osha to assume that the scar comes from his master. And I don't know how I feel about that or if I believe that fully. But I don't think he's like, I don't think we're getting into like, I'm Bella Swan and I'm 17 and I'm Edward Cullen and I'm however old Edward Cullen is. You know, I don't think we're getting to like vampire territory. I don't think, but maybe. I don't know. I'm just saying stuff to fill the air. I have no solid thoughts. I'm just here for the vibes.
I have some more thoughts on Vernestra and Qimir's past. I want to save that for the Vernestra section because I think there are some very telling ways that you could read Vernestra's face in this episode. So we'll get to that. But I am kind of in the camp that he is very, very old.
You think he's vampire old, problematic age gap, trademark.
I think he has had a lot of time to not only reflect on his time as a Jedi, but to learn the arts of the dark side and to perfect them. If we're thinking that he is, what was it, terracotta is the fighting style that he uses. If we think that that is a fighting style that hasn't been around since the Old Republic. Now, I'm not saying he's 1,000 years old.
The sacred Jedi text. This is what I'm talking about. He's reading from the same texts, okay?
Yeah.
He doesn't have to be 1,000 bajillion years old. He just has to read the same books.
God, could you imagine the age gap discourse if he's like 1,000 and she is like 20? I can't. I don't even want to. I don't even want to think about it. But let's talk about another line that's mentioned during this walk before we get back to the cave, which Osha is like, Soul's going to find you. His strength in the Force is very powerful. And Qimir says, you think that's his strength? That's your strength in the Force, Osha. Someone ought to teach you that. And damn, I will just be very candid here. I thought this was a huge clapback to the "you don't have power, you have his power" line from episode 9, because I was like,
I had forgotten about that. I had forgotten about that, and you just said those words again.
I was like, because here he is saying that's not his strength, that's your strength. So it's like, of course my mind jumped to that Tross quote, which, at the time and still to this day, I have a problem with that thinking. Yeah, it was really just an interesting moment of Qimir trying to tell her, separate yourself from the Jedi. You are not defined by what your master has taught you. You can find that within yourself and you have control of it.
And also it's a recognition of like, there's a reason that you were sought out by the Jedi. Yes, you were interested in something beyond the coven, but like, they're not just bringing random 8-year-olds into the order. It's kind of old, but also like, why were they on Brendok at all? Like they could have let these two force users learn in peace and probably nothing would have been different. But like, unless you recognize that something major is happening here, it's like, and it's also a signal of like, yes, you are your own power, but also like, you're not his power. He's taking advantage of you is kind of the subtext in that line. To me,
yeah, and perhaps maybe she's even more powerful than him, and she hasn't tapped into that quite yet. Stop thinking of your strength in the Force as confined to what the Jedi tell you is your strength in the Force.
100%.
You can grow, and that's the dark side, right? It's like more power than you can possibly imagine.
I don't think it's just the dark side though, because it's like it's separating the power in the Force from the Jedi. The Jedi don't have ownership over the light.
Right.
And like that's something I'll yell about until the end of time because I'm a huge fan of different Force interpretations.
Yeah.
The tide
I
is
say
just
dark.
as,
I say dark and light side. I think that's just the easiest way to kind of talk about some of these things. But the truth is, they're not a binary, right? It's just about your, like you've said before. It's about intent. It's about why you're using the Force the way you use it. It's not about like what you're doing with the Force, right?
And like even like the path of the open hand, like the Force is all around us. The Force is this, but we don't manipulate the Force. Like I think there's a sense in understanding the Force and feeling the Force, but also not using the Force. The path of the open hand kind of did some bad things. Thanks at the mother, #egg talk. But like that idea is also really compelling because it suggests the fundamental idea of how the Jedi teach the Force, which is like the Force surrounds and binds us, and every living thing. So to not use it, you are acknowledging the Force. Stop talking now.
There's a lot. Like the Force is complicated. Force is a messy thing to talk about. There's no, I don't know. I often feel like there's no right or wrong way to think about it because it's just this subject that we keep coming back to and having new interpretations of.
Yeah. And
You
I
know?
think that's exciting. That keeps it fresh.
Yeah, totally. Like this thing that we thought we knew so confidently is just not what it seems at times. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Force because we get back to the cave and Osha talks about how the Jedi said that with your strength in the Force, it fades over time without training. And
Right.
this was something we talked a lot about on our stream yesterday with Star Wars Explained, and I know you have some thoughts on it. But Qimir says that's what they told you. And it's sort of speaking to this idea that the Jedi are those gatekeepers. They dictate how the Force can be used. So it's this our way or the highway mentality. It's almost a scare tactic in some ways to say, if you don't learn the Force the way that we want you to learn it, you're out. And then you will lose that power at some point because you don't have the proper teachers. And so when people do leave the order, that's what they think. And so they don't ever contemplate the idea of tapping into the Force outside of the Jedi Order. So they lose it.
It's like the two-party system.
Right. Like the Force is still there, but you're almost like gaslit to think that if I do leave the Jedi, to think that if I leave the Jedi and my light dies, my Force dies. That's vanity.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because that conversation challenged me a little bit because I can't remember who responded, and I apologize. I know it was like less than 24 hours ago, but I didn't watch it back before this. But it got me thinking about, well, the light is a choice, and Elzar Mann, the whole conversation and temptation of the Force is like, well, you have to actively choose the light. And yes, you have all these pieces in you, but you have to choose the light. But also like Osha is sort of a testament to like, if you don't use it, it fades. In terms of the context of the Jedi. But then there's also, I think it was Molly who was saying that, the Force is like a muscle. Like it's much easier to give into the dark side. Those are emotions you can tap into all the time because you have those emotions. But in order to process things with a light side mentality, you have to continue to exercise that. And so I thought that was really interesting and challenged my interpretation of it a little bit. But yeah, I think if you fundamentally believe that the Force surrounds us and binds us, and that the Force is a part of every living thing, then the Force never leaves. It never goes away. You can choose to not acknowledge it, and that's kind of what Luke does. He cuts himself off from the Force, but I don't think that you lose the Force because the Force is fundamentally not a thing you can lose. It's like oxygen, right? If it's like oxygen, if you stop breathing, you're dead, and so that's like, I think the thing that I'm stuck on. And if anybody has like a really solid interpretation of this and they're like, Sarah, you're wrong, or like you're almost there, but please let me know, because I really want to clarify this in my mind, and I just haven't like gotten to the heart of it.
Well, Qimir says, quote, the Jedi teach there's only one way to access the Force, and if you don't do it their way, it fades. But there is another way. I
agree with him.
Below the surface of consciousness are powerful emotions: anger, fear, loss, desire.
Osha tucks hair behind ear.
Osha says that's the path to the dark side. And Qimir says semantics, which hottest way that anybody has ever said the word semantics. I will plant that flag. But I think that's the core of the show. Osha has been lied to. She's been told your strength in the Force fades. And now she's figuring out, oh, I didn't go away. It's not gone completely. I'm accessing it again. I was told I would never be able to if I left the Jedi, but here I am. I find out my sister is alive. There's the anger, one of those emotions. She's angry at her sister. The fear, right? The fear of, now that my sister's back, what does that mean for me? The sense of loss. She just watched Jackie die. She just watched Yor die. Desire. Here is this man who is offering her answers, who is offering her the truth, who is offering her a new perspective that she wants to hear.
And who's offering her his hot bod.
and again, like she, by feeling all of these emotions with what she is going through in the show, now the force is returning to her. Now she's having clarity. Now she's feeling the pull again. And I have to say, like, maybe like one of my critiques of the show is I still don't feel like I have a real good understanding of May as a character. I find the character of Osha much more compelling and much more interesting. And I don't know if that's because we haven't really seen much of May's perspective of the past. Maybe that will be changed after episode 7, but like, I just feel more drawn to Osha.
I agree. And it's one of those really interesting things to me that like, it's clear that the marketing very obviously led us on, right? It didn't reveal Osha throughout the entire marketing campaign, except for that one Twitter audio that had the funky subtitle with the names in it. Like that was the only kind of goof there. It wasn't meant to be shared. And so I think we have this eye on May, and as much as this is a story about these two, it's also just more a story about Osha. And so it's interesting that she was never revealed in the marketing, and that they kind of left that to the audience. And I remember after the premiere being really I don't know if I said this to you at all, but I was like, I will be really surprised to see how people react when they realize that she's playing two characters. Because I think, like if you go back to, this now I'm talking about marketing for a second. If you go back to Star Trek Into Darkness, Benedict Cumberbatch, Benedict Cumberbatch he played Khan, right? The iconic, legendary Star Trek villain Khan. And he told people, he did the whole Andrew Garfield, I'm not in this, but he's saying, I'm playing a new character. This is my new character's name. He's got this sort of evil vibe to him. He's this, that, and the other, and I'm not playing this guy. And then it was like a bait and switch, right? Because of course he's playing the iconic character. And there was some other commentary about that, like such as, like maybe a white man shouldn't be playing this character. But like that's a little bit separate to the conversation that it's like a little separate to the conversation that I'm having of the bait and switch of the marketing. Like if they had said up front that this is the character that he's playing, there might have been a slightly different reaction to that. And he might have been able to talk about it. Oh, this is the character I'm playing. This is the inspiration that I took from the original actor X, Y, and Z. I kind of felt the same thing about this show. We're not revealing Osha, and Osha's, the main character. She's kind of the in between, the most in between character that we're following. Are people going to feel duped by the fact that they didn't know she existed prior to this marketing? And it seems like, at least in our circles, that people didn't really care so much about that, which I think is like
a good sign,
a good reaction. And honestly, we aren't in tune with the other side of the fandom or whatever that doesn't like the show very much. Like that's paying a lot of attention to that is not really my vibe. I'm sorry that people aren't enjoying it, but go watch something else that you like better and you'll be happier, kind of a vibe. But like, yeah, I had wondered about that. And it makes me wonder also if Amandla could have talked about Osha up front, how we would have felt about the show would have been different. But yeah, it's interesting. Point being, it's interesting that May feels a little bit secondary to Osha because our eyes were so focused on May throughout the entire lead up. And yeah, I feel like if the show had the ability to have longer episodes, then we could have gotten a little bit more meat about who May is. And to me, that continues to be the missing piece in this puzzle from episode 5, and the way that she kind of flips back and forth to her throughout this episode. I don't want to go too far into her because we're still talking about Osha, but like her throughout this episode and her kind of mission. Yeah, I don't know. It's very curious to me the way things have how the tables have turned.
Yeah,
for these
you make
two
some
characters.
you make some great points that I definitely agree with. And also too, I think maybe something that's holding the show back a bit is the mystery of Brendock in some ways, and how that's being how those curtains are being pulled back. I think I like to think like what the show would have been had we pulled that curtain back sooner to kind of know more about these characters' pasts and what is actually driving their motivation a bit more. Because I like when we know things, but the characters don't. And then finding out, or like watching the characters find out for themselves, having that revelation. I think that's really
Alphabet
interesting. Yeah. So like, there's some element of that, but like I think it'll ultimately just depend on how they stick the landing and like what the revelation of the past actually is. And if it is really like earth shattering, that kind of remains to be seen. And I have confidence that, whatever reason that they are holding it back is like a major reason. Like there is something huge about the past that we don't know. Otherwise, like why hide it, So I'm excited if next week's episode is the Kogonada part 2 flashback. How is that going to be set up? What are we going to learn? Whose perspective will it be from? And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But yeah, a lot of thoughts, but I'm really loving the character of Osha. Like I think she's just super compelling. I love her story. I love the way that these two characters are interacting with one another, how they seem like they're two sides of the same coin, and how they have a very similar past with the Jedi. And that brings us to this conversation on the cliffside where, she's holding the lightsaber against his midsection. Qimir is basically forcing her to look inwards at herself, look in the mirror and ask yourself. Qimir says, why do you think of yourself as a Jedi? They didn't want you. And this is very like Kylo, you're nothing, but not to me kind of conversation. Qimir says, what you're feeling now, this anger, this pain, this is who you are. The Jedi saw it, and that's why they threw you away. Osha says, they didn't throw me away. And then Qimir says, then why aren't you a Jedi? Why aren't you a Jedi, Osha? And she says, because I failed. And she ignites the lightsaber and pushes it up against him. And I was like, oh, this is hot. But also like the acting between these two in this moment is just so rich. And he says, I understand. I lost everything, Osha. But when you lose everything, that's when you're finally free. And he puts his hand on her arm. What did you make of this conversation? Because I think this was like probably the scene of the episode. This was like the standout.
Thank you. Nudity this, nudity that, pool this, pool that. Okay, throw it all away. I don't care about it. This is what I'm talking about. This is the delicious food. Right, because before this we get why do you love people who can only go so far? Who can't go as deep as you can?
More innuendo. Here we go.
It's fine. It's fine. But like, right, when you talk about attachment, when you talk about the Jedi, when you talk about the relationships that Jedi have with each other, they're colleagues at the end of the day. This is what Indara says in episode 3. Here are my colleagues, Master Sol Galnaka and my Padawan Torben. Okay. There are it's a working religion, cult, organization, government adjacent. It's not a family. It's not a partner. It's not any of these things necessarily that feel so, dare I say, intrinsic to the human experience, like important to the human experience. And I'm not doing that to center romantic relationships. Okay. I'm really not. I reject that. This is me fighting with myself right now. Because I don't think that romantic relationships are like the core of human existence. But I think Qimir makes a point in saying, why do you spend so much energy on people who are fundamentally incapable of spending that energy back on you because they have a doctrine that doesn't allow them to?
Right. Like Yor turned you in for a crime you didn't commit and he didn't hesitate. Jackie would have just been the same one-sided relationship. Like these are not two-way symbiotic relationships. You are getting nothing out of this because you are kind of shackled by wanting to think you can still be a Jedi, but you can't. You were thrown away. Like, again, you're nothing, but not to me. We were both two people who were thrown away. We were both wronged by the system, but now that we've both lost everything, we're free. And that's also like, I think this conversation gave some more insight to the even in the revelation of our triumph, we realize the depths of our despair. Like the triumph is being free, but they realize the depths of their despair, which is like we were thrown away, we were discarded by the system, we were rejected for being other, we were rejected for having much more potential than the system allowed us to. Right? Like Osha says she failed. She failed by Jedi standards. She failed by what they dictated was success versus failure. But outside of that system, is her failure a success? She just didn't live up to expectation.
Right.
But expectation, you know, you can be really good at your job, but if your boss sets you a very specific annual performance objective and you don't meet that, even though you're doing so well in many other parts, you know, it's like needs improvement, or like you put on a performance improvement plan, you know? And so this is like kind of OSHA's thing, is like, I was doing all the good things, but I didn't do that one thing on my objective, and I got like a bad note for it, kind of thing.
Right. Or like if you're a K-pop idol trainee, but you're not pretty enough. And you're like maybe the best singer in your whole bunch of trainees, but they're not going to debut. The company's not going to debut you because you don't fit the beauty standard. Like you're functionally good enough at the task, but they just don't think that you're the right pick.
Right.
Anyway, it's a little problematic. It's problematic. Oh, I just wanted to talk about this scene in how it is framed. Quite literally, the shots. Because there's this sort of cloudy atmosphere to this setting, and they are out on the patio, if you will, the entrance.
Qimir's porch.
Qimir's porch. I like how it has like very kind of cut out, like here are the railing. Like somebody had to Qimir like wire the railings, make sure he didn't fall when he got out of bed and wanted to enjoy his morning calf, you know? Like I really did think about that because it feels so like human built in this environment. It's funny.
Right.
But these two are framed in shadow. So right as the scene begins, when he's kind of walking up to her, we see kind of the opening of the cave, the entrance, another rock formation island behind them, and then the lightness of the sea and the sky and the clouds, but they are entirely in shadow. And I think that was just really compelling. There's a sort of in-betweenness to it, right? They're not in the natural sunlight and they're not in the darkness, but they are in the shadow. And I liked that. I thought that was really compelling. And I think about that as somebody who really loves a good natural light on the skin. Like, wow, ooh, the sun, beautiful. So I was like, oh, they're not, you know, quote unquote, well lit in this moment, but they aren't dark either. They're not like in the cave. They're not at nighttime. Like it's clearly the middle of the day out. And so I liked the ambiguity of the feeling that the shadow gives.
That's a great call out. I mean, I was thinking more of the color of the outfits, but lighting is so telling sometimes. And I think you're definitely on to something there. Again, these things aren't coincidences. There's a lot of thought that goes into blocking and setting up shots in very specific ways. So I love that. I love that observation. I'm gonna have to like go back and kind of like look at that imagery there.
There's also a moment, like there's also multiple times throughout this conversation when he says her name. He says sentence, OSHA. Sentence, OSHA. Like he's humanizing her, really trying to get in her head by acknowledging her like that. And I think that is great. 10 out of 10. Would watch this scene again.
Yeah. I want to go to this quote from Leslye again from our friend Maggie's Collider article. Quote, OSHA is extremely in denial about her own anger at the Jedi and at her father, i.e. Soul. She feels like she's not allowed to be angry, and she's in an enormous amount of pain over her sister and their history, and she also feels like she's not allowed to feel that. So someone coming in and saying, actually, feeling all of these things is not only okay, but could actually restore your spiritual foundation is almost too much. Leslye continues and says, I don't think that's manipulation. I think he's telling her the truth. When he says semantics, I think he means it. He's just like, why wouldn't you use what is obviously the part of you that needs to be explored the most? Why wouldn't you lean into that? Why would you continue to suppress it for really no reason? The Jedi threw you away, so what are we still doing? What is this thing that you are thinking? You don't owe them anything. You owe yourself to start living your life and recognize your own strength in the Force. End quote. Oh my God, this is such a good quote. This is so good, Leslye. I want to like put this, I want to like take this quote and like put it in a cake and like put the cake in the oven and then just take the cake out and then like take both my hands and just literally like shove it in my face. Like that's how good this is. I'm sorry that was very descriptive, but like, oh, it's so
do you know
good.
those like I don't know what they're called, but I watched some like cake making videos once, and it's like where you print out the image on edible paper and then you put it on there. That's what you need to do with this quote.
Let's do it.
Like,
I'm gonna come out to Chicago
it's so delicious.
and we're gonna do it.
Oh my God, come to Chicago anytime.
Yeah. I'll bring a Qimir Leslye Headland quote cake.
That sounds like so much fun. I love friendship. I love friendship. Anyway, I want to kind of juxtapose like Raylo and Qimir a little bit within the context of this scene. And this is really not a dig at either pairing because I like them both.
They can coexist. Wow.
They can coexist. Okay. This is not me here doing that. Because I think like the key difference between these two pairings is like one of these people is one of the members of this relationship in one of them is really kind of emotionally not put together. And the other one is really put together, right? Like that's the dynamic that we're getting in both of these relationships. But in Raylo, they're both a little bit not put together. But Ben is definitely less put together than Ray is. And in Qimir, Qimir is really, really, really put together. There is a certain emotional confidence that he has that Ben doesn't have until the very end of Tross, you know, when he can embrace the light again. The conflict is coming from the person who needs to do the learning. In Qimir, and in Raylo, the conflict is coming from the person who has already learned, right? And finds himself in the wrong spot, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So and that's actually, Leslye kind of mentioned that too when comparing Raylo and Qimir, because she had said like the main difference was that Osha never tries to turn Qimir.
Osha never tries to turn Qimir, and in the "you're nothing but not to me" line, delicious food. I love it. But it also contextualizes like Ray within Ben. You know, like it puts them together. Whereas Qimir is saying, I understand. Your power is yours. And I understand the emotions that you're going through. Here's how to access something different. And there's a certain equality emotionally kind of to that, or like a less is he's not saying you need me. He's not saying you need me. Again, this is the difference between pupil and apprentice, right? He's not saying you need me and you have to rely on me. He's saying, here's the door. I think you should open it. Whereas it feels like, yes, Ray is trying to pull him back to the light. And at the same time, Ben is saying like the door is take my hand. Don't open the door. There is no door. The door is you have to hold my hand in order to learn. You know, like, so there's like a difference in perspective between both of these two pairings. And I really like what we're seeing with Qimir so far, and that it's different from Raylo in the sense that Qimir being a really competent. I really like my conflicted bad guys. Let's be so clear right now. When the pain is on Ben's face in the throne room, in literally all of TLJ, but like in that moment where Snoke is going after him, I'm like, yeah, that's delicious. That's delicious. He doesn't know what he wants. He's just a baby boy, you know? And at the same time, I love a really competent villain. He's like, hi, here's what I've got for you. It's just knowledge and information. And it's going to be hot and exciting, you know? And so both of these characters are really fun and interesting in different ways. And I like exploring this particular trope in these different ways.
And I also, now that you're kind of talking about doors and opening doors, I'm almost thinking of the way that Qimir is appealing to Osha is the same way that her mom appealed to her.
Ooh.
Because what did her mom say? There's no cosmic force that decides your destiny. You want to pull the thread, then pull it.
You pull it.
And I think Qimir is offering her that sort of same solution. It's there is no cosmic force that gets to decide how you use the force. The Jedi don't get to decide how you use the force. You
Prophecy do. Who? Prophecy what?
He's offering her a choice, right?
Yeah.
This whole time he's like, you can kill me anytime you want while we're here. My ship is over there. If you want to wait till the tide's gone, you can leave. That's your choice.
Right.
But don't you want to also like pull a thread and learn a little bit more about yourself? Like, do you want to just go back to that same life that you've been living of, again, denial of all these emotions that you are pretending to suppress beneath your consciousness? Open your eyes, open that door, pull the thread, let those emotions in, use them, be who you're always supposed to be, find your strength, access these parts of yourself that you don't want to access. And I think because he's appealing to her in that kind of logical way that her mom did, that's why she's willing to listen. He's saying a lot of the things that she probably heard growing up, especially if we think that the witches of the coven leaned more into the quote unquote dark side again, but like the unnatural ways according to the Jedi, right? And like
ambiguity of the force, perhaps.
Yeah, and like Qimir is exploring the force in that same way. So I think to Osha that is appealing because she has that teacher now in a way that can kind of show her some things about herself. Whereas before it was May always being the one that was the more powerful one, right? She was never good at blocking Osha.
And there's always this like really kind of, my mom is a twin. So it's like, there's always this a little bit of competition between twins that's always there. You love your sibling, you care about them. But like, if you're growing up and they score a few points higher on the test every time, like maybe you resent that a bit. I also want to take a moment just to like talk about the intimacy a little bit between Osha and Qimir, and on my laptop right now, I always have the episode open while we're talking about them, and it just says somber music playing.
She's actually had this moment pause since Tuesday. It's just been on her laptop the entire time. You've just been staring at it, right?
Expose me like that, but I at least no, I've had it set up here for about 10 minutes.
It's your computer background.
Well, no, it's BTS, but like it could change. It could change. But yeah, when she gets this lightsaber up to him, it's this sort of like empty threat, because she, again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, she's not actually going to kill him. She wants to know what he has to say, and so she's not holding him in a really threatening moment. The lightsaber is not actually up to his neck. Like he could not. The hairs. He's got long hair. His hair can't be singed as it is. She is holding the hilt of the lightsaber to his chest and like is putting pressure up against him, which like tucks hair behind ear. But it's this moment of like, I'm angry and I'm feeling this, and this is just how I'm exploring that or lashing out about it, but there's no actual intention behind it. And he knows that because his hand comes and gently holds her forearm. I have no commentary. I just really wanted to mention that.
Me in the corner smashing my action figures' face together.
Right. When they're looking at it, they're staring at each other's eyes, I'm like losing my mind. Like, so first of all, she's like, okay, hold the phone. She's first staring at the lightsaber hilt pressed against his chest, and then he puts his hand on her forearm, and then she slowly brings her gaze up to his eyes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm insane. I'm bonkers crazy. I am chewing the walls right now.
Of your enclosure, gnawing at the bars.
I'm just chewing cement. I am chewing drywall. I am doing parkour, but then eating the walls. I can't be stopped. A padded room can't stop me because I will just eat it. like
she's chewing through the walls. Someone stop her.
No enclosure is enough to keep me tamed right now. I feel insane. I feel insane watching this. I feel crazy.
Man.
I feel what's happening? What's happening? Why am I being let into this moment? Why would they do that to me? I'm just a girl.
Listeners, if you couldn't tell, this scene very much affected Sarah, as did it many people in the Star Wars fandom. I share that sentiment. I was also chewing at the bars of my enclosure because I wanted out, and I felt like a prisoner of my own mind watching this scene. And I was like, I will never leave this moment, and
You're
I will
like,
think about it for a
AO3.
while.
AO3 open now.
refresh. Yeah, what a scene, honestly. I think this was the most intimate scene that we've probably gotten since the hand touch in Last Jedi, if I'm being completely honest. I think this was a hand touch moment equivalent.
The hand touch is so good, though.
You know, yeah, it is really good.
Now I'm just thinking about the hand touch.
All of these things can coexist, and it's beautiful, and we don't have to pit them against each other. It's just like another little check mark in the enemies to lovers column of Star Wars. And I love this. I love, again, that Leslye is not shying away from she's been open. She ships these two characters. Like, she said that in the interview. Like, we are getting some really cool, interesting stuff to explore between these characters. And I love it. I love it so much.
Yes.
So damn good.
So delicious.
Let's move on. Back into the apartment. Qimir is at his desk. He's repairing his little helmet. And this is when things get a little interesting, because Qimir is talking about how he made a mistake with May. He thought she wanted more than revenge. He thought she wanted what he wants, which is the power of two.
Power two?
Power of two? Power of Manny?
Two?
Power of
Manny. Manny, just in tow.
Yeah.
Power of two, rule of two, power of one, power of two, power of many.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimate power.
All of it.
Unlimited power.
Unlimited power. But speaking of the Emperor.
True Jedi power.
True Jedi. Chicka-boing. Yeah. Speaking of the Emperor, though, this is a good point. The Rise of Skywalker. When Palpatine has Rey and Kylo,
yes.
Right when we think things are getting going and he stops them, he says the power of two restores the one true Emperor, and he starts like sucking their little force things out of their bodies.
I'm so glad you remember things about the Rise of Skywalker, because I just genuinely don't.
But the power of two, like that phrase, intentionally, I think, invokes that scene, and it makes you think about the dyad specifically, a force dyad.
And I'm telling you that I didn't remember that. Like, you saying that now is telling me that happened.
Yeah. But it's so fascinating to know that Leslye is thinking of the dyad. I want to go to this quote to set up our conversation here on this line, which is, quote, I would say primarily it, being the dyad, means the relationship between two Sith. However, I think there's a secondary meaning that will be revealed later in the story. Put a pin in that one. Leslye continues, quote, the concept of a force dyad is very important to the story, even if it isn't necessarily name-checked, because I think the Sith are much more aware of what a dyad is. And I think the Jedi haven't figured that out yet in terms of how powerful that particular relationship between two force-sensitive beings could be. There are many things in the High Republic that the Jedi would consider mythology or lack the language to describe, whereas the Sith know that they exist. I think the Sith are also tuned to some aspects of the Force and ways to manipulate the Force that the Jedi are just not tuned into yet. You know, you and I have like talked about like the sacred texts and like putting names to things, and the Jedi's lack of knowledge around things that haven't been around for a while. Example of Terracotta, like the fighting style that Qimir uses, right? It's this thing that the Sith know exists, but the Jedi have only ever considered a mythology. It's something of the Old Republic. It's not something they really have a lot of language to describe or know about. Therefore, when Qimir uses that fighting style, he just completely owns them, right? But it was really interesting to think that the dyad is this thing that the Jedi aren't attuned to, but the Sith in the background are trying to attain, right? Like Palpatine wants a dyad with Anakin. That's the seduction of the dark side. Qimir wants a dyad with Osha. He wanted it with May, and now he wants it with Osha because he thinks maybe Osha, again, like two people who've been wronged by the system, what better way to get back at the Jedi than two people they thought don't have the Force anymore because it faded. Now not only learning the Force through their emotion, but also linking up together to have the most powerful pairing known to the galaxy. And the Jedi don't even know what's going to hit them.
Right.
Really interesting thought exploration here.
I think that's really compelling because it contextualizes the idea of the dyad within the idea of working towards it. I have always thought of the dyad with really, like, in regards to Rey and Kylo as very red string of fate, fated in the Force, right? And I wonder if the way that Leslye is envisioning the idea of a dyad as something that can be built, trained up. I hate to say the word manufacture because that's not exactly what I'm trying to say, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. You know, something that can be created. And that idea is really interesting to me because it does put it within the idea of the dark side. And it also takes an idea of the Force out of the bureaucracy of the Jedi. And it says, well, the Jedi can't access this. The Jedi are this is not even on their radar because they're too stuck in the bureaucracy of how they're built and how they work in order to actually find these sort of pairings that would create such incredible levels of power or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot to chew on here. I hadn't thought about the dyad in the context of only the Sith.
Me either, yeah.
Maybe that dyad is achieved through the emotion, through the exploration of emotion that the Jedi don't. Right? It's like that level of power that one can attain. I think the Jedi try to tamper that and put a ceiling on it, whereas the Sith want to take away the ceiling and say, like, what is possible? And it's just the nature of power, right? It's like, it's addicting, it's intoxicating. You let the power in. All those who have power fear to lose it. So, like, how do you not lose the power? You keep gaining it. You just keep taking in and taking in and taking. It's like consumptionism of power. It's like, I just want more and more and more.
Right.
And the Jedi don't think that's a good thing. And so, yeah, I wonder if that's why we haven't necessarily heard of a dyad within the Jedi Order. I mean, there might have been moments where, again, you could work towards that, like, partnership, but then that would be un-Jedi-like potentially.
And that's a good point.
You know, like Avar and Elzar, could they have been a dyad? Could they be a dyad?
Could they still be a dyad? Does being a dyad require smooching?
It could.
Because think about this. Rey and Ben have smooched. Qimir and Osha have not yet smooched. But
put a footnote on that one, though.
Right,
could happen.
Right. Could
smooch,
happen.
Future smooch.
Yeah. And I just want to say that if it does require smooching, I recognize that I have just listed off 3 kind of heteronormative ships. And I just want to say that I don't think the dyad should be relegated to heteronormativity.
I do love, though, that the show is exploring the idea of a dyad. It was one of those things that was introduced at the 11th hour, and we're like, and if the show kind of brings more light to that and explores it in a very, like, nuanced and kind of compelling way, I'm all for it. Like, I love this stuff. I love, again, like, continuing to take what we know about the Force and spin it.
Right.
I'm always a fan of that completely.
I also am, like, personally really here for as much as like genuinely at this point don't remember a lot of the Rise of Skywalker. That's just me. I support everybody who loves and cherishes that movie for sure. As much as I like don't remember a lot of it, I am open to positive reimaginings of the ideas in that movie in my mind. Like that one line from Luke that was like, the Jedi's destiny is overcoming fear or whatever. I hated that line when I first heard it. I was like, it made me uncomfortable. I didn't like it and I didn't agree with it. Yeah, in the media that's come since then, I have had the ability, and it's definitely happened here on the podcast, and amongst our conversations, to like recontextualize that line, reimagine that line and what it means, and the positive spin on it. And I've really appreciated that. So if this show or other Star Wars media can spin the dyad in a new way, not that I'm a dyad hater or anything like that, but spin the dyad in a new, more complex way that gives us more meat to understand this idea, I'm really looking forward to that.
Totally. No, I'm in complete agreement. All right, let's talk about the scar. And we alluded to it earlier. a little bit, but we get more of the conversation here
Right.
about, was it somebody, he says it was somebody who threw him away that gave it to him. She says, you're Jedi Master. And you were of the mind that he doesn't say yes or no to that. So like he could
Right.
imply that it was a master when it may not be. So let's talk about the shape of the scar once again. The theory is that it looks like a whiplash. And I think there is something very intentional with seeing this conversation happen, talking about a master. And then immediately in the next scene, we're over on Kofar with Vernestra and Mog. And then we get the introduction of the light whip for the first time on screen. Having these scenes back to back, we know Leslye is not shying away from like planting crumbs and having us kind of infer the twist and make our own assumptions that end up maybe being true, likely, like just like with Qimir's reveal, right? And so I feel like the show is signaling, hey, remember Scar that looked like a thing, maybe been a master? Boom, here's a Jedi Master, Vernestra Rwoh. Look, she's got a light whip.
Yeah.
And I think putting those two things side by side is very clearly indicating Vernestra had something to do with this. And we can talk a minute about Vernestra here, because throughout the scene on Kofar, she is sensing the sounds of what transpired,
Echoes.
almost like Cal Kestis and Quinlan Voss, how they can kind of see memories of other beings they come into contact with. And Mog says, who else would possess the power to slay such a strong group? And there's a moment of recognition from Vernestra. Like the camera pans to her and she's like staring into space. You can see she's remembering something, and she says something to tip the scales. It's a moment of recognition. It's a presence she has not felt since kind of moment,
But it's giving, but it like, I don't know, something to tip the scales really threw me, because I was like, that feels like a line. That feels like it's not a, Star Wars line that we haven't heard before. Like it feels known. And I guess she said it in an earlier episode. But like, what has happened in the past 150 years or so, 100 years or so after Marchion Ro? Like Marchion Ro is something to tip the scales in a way. The Nile, the Nameless, the Drengir, the Blight, what have you. That's something to tip the scales. So I'm not 100% convinced that she is, or she was, his Jedi Master.
Because my thought with something to tip the scales was she is recognizing in that moment, this is Qimir's handiwork. And so in her mind, she's thinking, if Qimir did this, Qimir that I used to train, again, assumption, Qimir that I used to train and left the order, and I thought he would lose access to the Force, because that's what we say. If he actually maintained that access, that is going to tip the scales of balance. That is going to tip the scales more towards the dark side, because the only way Qimir could have maintained that learning and that connection to the Force is through the dark side. That will tip the scales. And, I go back to episode 2 where she said, I recognize this fighting style.
Clearly a Jedi.
It's of Jedi nature. She's recognizing that fighting style because she trained Qimir, Qimir trained May. She's recognizing her own patterns of fighting. We know in the books that Vernestra takes on a more aggressive fighting style with her light whip. Of course she's going to recognize the patterns. It's all there right in front of her. She's like, that's why she doesn't want to tell the High Council, because she thinks if there is any remote possibility that Qimir is still out there after I might have wronged him, everybody's got their secrets. She's got to maintain that secret, whatever it might be. Maybe she still pins this on Soul so she can continue hiding her secret, which is so ironic, because she's like, Elzar, go tell the council what you did. Right.
Right.
Like, the irony that she grows up and now maybe finds herself in the same position as Elzar to think, oh, wait, I get it. I got to maintain my secret.
She's also kept secrets in the past. And this is something that I had to be reminded of yesterday, which is not, like, the light whip was kind of kept on the DL. Like that's kind of an important understanding, her path. Like that's a whole nother thing that she's just got it. But I also think that it's possible that she's interpreting this with a much wider context, right? Like, I think it's possible that she's understanding this as, okay, so I know the Jedi to be the light, and within the Jedi, the keepers of the light, this is what fundamentally what balance is. we are keeping the status quo. The status quo is currently balanced. And somebody who would be harnessing the dark, therefore, would be attempting to tip the scales. If it says Jedi on the scale, and there's a light side and a dark side, they're equal. But then like somebody decided to place a pebble that's not the Jedi onto the dark side. That's something to tip the scale. So I thought of this with a much wider context without the specificity of Qimir, but like I don't think that your interpretation or anybody who's saying the theory that's being, you know, kind of more or less clearly laid out for us is wrong. I'm just now on my typical, I'm not going to get onto the train until it's in the station. And everybody's like, we're already here. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I recognize that I failed to get on the train to the last stop, but I just wanted to make sure I got the most out of my ticket by, you know, sitting in my seat for 5 minutes, you know, like, I'm late to the party and I'm willing to have been wrong.
Yeah. No, I do like your imagery though, of like the pebble on the scale. And like, cause I think you're right. I think from a point of view, it is probably just a very general point of view for Vernestra of like,
I've been wrong a lot so far though.
Yeah. Yeah, Bail Organa, season 2 of Andor, it's going to happen.
And I'm not ready to say that.
We're getting Krennic. Of course,
I'm not
Bail
ready to
Organa
say,
is going to come back.
I'm not ready to say that. He could have said Jimmy Smits in that same comment, okay? And he didn't.
Will Jimmy Smits be in the building is the question. A deep cut for podcast listeners, if you know that one. But only other thoughts on Vernestra here while we're talking about her. I love the mention that she gets sick in hyperspace, which... Good call out to book readers. Also, her ship being named the Canteros. Hello, it's so
that's
crying.
Imri. That's Imri. Rip Imri.
You think Imri died like of old age, and Vernestra was just like, "Hey, I'm gonna name my ship after you." By the way, and he's like, "Thank you."
But like, can you just think about all these species who live older than like typical human beings, having to see people come and go?
Like the fact that Grogu is going to live much longer than Din Djarin. He's going to be like on his deathbed and Grogu's like there comforting him. Yeah, I think about that all the time.
Except he's still going to be goo goo gaga-ing.
Maybe he can talk by then.
Maybe.
But honestly, the goo goo gaga would make me cry even harder than Grogu just being like, I will miss you.
Rip dad, love you.
Imagine that's his first words. R.I.P. dad. Goodbye.
Illy.
Yeah. Only other thought on Vernestra is this an external review of the Jedi Order that's happening with Rey in court. Again, just like another seed being planted with the Jedi and the Senate and the Republic. And, you know, who has it out for the Jedi? And like, why do they want to paint the Jedi in such a negative light? But I think like this is early on just turning public sentiment against the Jedi. So like later down the line when Palpatine's like, hey, they tried to assassinate me. There is some basis for that. Maybe the Jedi aren't viewed favorably, especially once they start the war. It's just like decades upon decades of bad news. And it gets to a boiling point that Palpatine can, you know, leverage. So just some interesting things there. We talked about the scar. Last thing we can talk about with Osha and Qimir here is the helmet. So we know the helmet is a sensory deprivation helmet like they used when they were younglings. He really wants her to put this helmet on so she can learn to trust herself. And he says, just you and the Force and what you bring with you.
Chapter 18, Shadow Fall by Alexander Freed. That which you take with you.
There we go.
The most effed up thing I have read potentially ever. That chapter. Eureka Quell is trying to get in the ship or something, right? And she's talking to Ito, the former torture droid, now therapy droid, and we are going through every bad thing ever, and then it gets worse.
one of like the best things in Star Wars writing I've ever read. Anybody who hasn't read the Alphabet Squadron books, please go do that. So good.
They're my babies. I cherish them with my whole heart.
Yeah. We have a chapter 18 theory, by the way, that we have to revisit at some point, just to put a pin in that.
Yeah.
Eventually. It's going to be a project, but
we should start taking notes. Actually.
We should start the Google Doc anyway.
But that brought me back to that because that was such like a crazy Force moment. It needed something very specific in that moment. The Force. And that might have not been intentional at all, but I really liked that callback. But yeah, the mask being the sensory deprivation chamber really illuminated to me why Chimir's movements in the mask are as rigid and inhuman as they are, because he's not relying on sight. So when he snaps his head in the end of episode 4, right? Or the way that he's moving in 5 is because he's just him in the forest. He's not using his eyes to understand where his enemy is. And that kind of shifted everything into context for me in a really interesting sort of way.
Yeah, that's great. He's like real time reaction, no time to think, only fight. Yeah, that's a great observation, honestly. And that line, you are what it's what you bring with you. You know, it made me think of Dagobah in the cave and Luke going in there and fighting Vader and seeing his own face within the mask. You know, it starts to make me question, what is Osha going to see now that she's put on the mask? I love that point of view inside the helmet, the breathing, the kind of eerie sense of, wow, nothing. She can hear nothing. She can see nothing. Takes you aback a little bit.
Yeah,
but, you know,
my note was fucked up.
Yeah, and like knowing next week could be a flashback. Her putting on this helmet, does that bring her clarity about what actually happened on Brundok? Maybe she put her own twist of events on it because of what she wanted to believe about that night, and therefore it clouded her vision about what actually did happen. Does this lack of sense, tuning out all the noise of the galaxy and of her life, can she finally see the truth? And we were always thinking episode 7 was going to be Osha's or May's perspective. Maybe it's just Osha's perspective again, but with clarity.
Right.
You know, do you have any thoughts on that? Like what this might indicate for next episode, and who you think's, again, assuming it's going to be a flashback, like who we're actually going to see the flashback of?
It's what I have to think about that, because I was like, that's 100% going to be May. It's 100% going to be May. And then we had this conversation with Alex and Molly yesterday. And I was like, oh, the potential for it to be Osha or Qimir instead of May, or a combination of all of the above, is so possible. And I mean, there's also the genuine possibility that it's not a flashback at all. But like based on how it ends in the Sol and May story. But maybe also, maybe it's a Sol point of view, low-key. He's like, you're going to listen to what I have to say, May. And maybe it's him walking through that.
Well, yeah, and I was even thinking if Osha is seeing the truth with the helmet, and then we're juxtaposing that with what Sol is telling May, then we're gonna know Sol where Sol is lying.
Oh,
next episode is gonna be like a mic drop moment, I feel like.
Yeah, how are there only 2 episodes left?
Yeah,
I'm overwhelmed.
I mean, this is a good place to talk about May and Sol as we start to wrap up.
As we start to wrap up,
going on.
2 hours into this episode that is, let's see, 32 minutes long.
You know, as those posters, the eclipse is getting more eclipsy. Our episodes just keep getting longer and longer every week, which is like, again, High Republic show, duh.
Right. This is very, we should have known.
Is finale going to be like 3 hours long? Probably, maybe, perhaps.
It's possible.
Very, very possible. What did you think of May and Sol in this episode, and kind of the journey that they go through on the ship?
This is an interesting piece, because we wondered at the end of episode 5 who was going to know what, when, where, why, and how, right? And we figured out that Qimir knows it's Osha literally right away, like at the end of that episode when he sees her tattoo. But Sol has just lost everybody, and something terrible has happened again, and he is in the throes of his grief. So does he understand that that is not Osha? And thank God we got Basil, MVP of this episode. Basil has got the pip droid, his head, and he's gonna like figure that out. And he's also gonna trap May. And I thought this was interesting because I had seen some like different interpretations of this online, with the fact that some people thought he knew at X, Y, and Z moments. Soul knew at X, Y, and Z moments, including the, you love that droid so much, including the hug. But I don't really think he knew it was May until Basil tells him right before he stuns her. Like, that is my take. That is my read on this episode. And it's so interesting to me that she is attempting to like get information out of him, that she's kind of attempting to be Osha in this moment, that she's kind of playing on his grief in that way. And wow, Lee Jung-jae is just acting the heck out of this. The grief, the moment we sit with him just in a close up, watching him emote and watching him feel what he's feeling is devastating and incredible. And also it makes me really wonder if Maeve's journey was still at the end to be like, hi, I'm May Anasea, and there's a Sith baddie on the loose. His name is Qimir, but that's definitely not his actual name, which was kind of the plan in episode 4 when, she ran away. Going to turn
and that's where I struggle with May, because she says that she wants to go to the Republic, and then she's like initially trying to kill Soul on the ship. Like, she gets her knife ready. I'm like, what? Like, what does she want? Like, what is her goal?
Right.
And I don't feel like I have a good understanding of that goal quite yet. And I hope that like whatever comes out of this conversation between Soul and May, like, makes her motivation much more clear. Like, I want to know more about her and like what makes her tick. And I don't feel like I know that yet.
Again, she's the missing piece for sure.
Yeah. But to your point about Lee Jung-jae's acting, so good. I feel like often in Star Wars TV, we kind of rush past pivotal moment, or the outfall of pivotal moments, and like how our characters are dealing with a loss of a character or a traumatic event. And sometimes we can like skip past some of those things and to really just, again, sit with him for a while, almost like a minute and a half long.
Mm-hmm.
Put his acting on display and really made you feel like, God damn, he is going through it. And May tells him, when you really want something, it can cloud your mind. You see what you want to see. So for him, he wants to find Qimir and he wants to rescue Osha. He wants nothing else. He doesn't want to lose another apprentice.
Right.
And so for him, his judgment is very clouded at this moment in time. And that's why he maybe doesn't sense his May initially, because he is so distraught. He is so overcome with grief and attachment that he has tunnel vision. It's only one thing he wants, and that's it. And I was a little scared at the end when he has her restrained and he says, I've had 16 years to think about what I wanted to say to you if I ever got the opportunity. So you're going to listen.
It feels so focused and a little bit alarming. It's such a juxtaposition from what we had just seen throughout the whole episode. And also,
do you feel like that's a red herring? Like he's actually just going to be nice, or is there more malice to what he is going to tell her?
I don't know. I have no idea. Is it an apology? Is it anger? I don't know, and I can't tell. And that's freaking me out.
Maybe it's anger at himself, not her.
Right.
He is so angry, and he's also scared about apologizing if he feels like, sorry, I couldn't save you. And I think like the end of this episode is making us think he's going to be aggressive, when really it's just like him looking in the mirror and coming to terms with that.
Right.
Owning up to whatever mistake he did make. And he's just nervous about that. And he's also angry at himself for even making that mistake in the first place.
He's nervous. He's angry. And is everything going to backfire because he decided to hyperspace away from Vernister and the rest of the Jedi?
I don't think Soul goes beyond this season. Because when you think about the Sith, you know, the Jedi still think the Sith are gone. Everybody died on Kofar. And so many moments in this episode were like, the transmission cut out. The lights are off right when I'm about to say something. I'm going to hyperspace. And it's just like, he is doing everything in his power not to relay the message to the Jedi. It's very Deus Ex Machina. Like he can't get to them. He can't tell them what happened. The knowledge lies with 4 people right now.
Right.
You know?
Right.
A little scared.
I live in fear. That's where I'm at right now. Now that we're on seriously the back half of this episode. Yeah. Our back half of this series. I don't know.
Well, don't say series, because I think we might get a season 2.
Hey,
manifesting.
In Britain, they say series for every season.
True. Good point. Well, let's hope we find that out soon, though, Sarah. For a season 2, I would like to see it.
Well,
I would like to see it.
Me too.
I feel like
Leslye, where it at?
The fan drum is beating loudly. People are loving the show, and it feels good. Feels good to be a Star Wars fan right now.
You know what? You're right.
We're kind of back. We're very back indeed.
You could say it. You could say that.
Yeah. And we'll be back again next week. I think that's the end of our episode. So
I think so too.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening and tuning into this 2-hour discussion on the Acolyte. I think this is the longest we've ever recorded about Star Wars TV. So,
Andor.
Yeah.
Oh,
feels good. Feels organic. We're back in our element. Enemies to lovers, High Republic. So many good things in the show, and I can't wait to talk about the last 2 episodes. Although, please don't end, please.
That's right. Yeah.
If you want to hear more from us, follow us on all of our socials. We got 2 more Acolytes to talk about. We got some interviews that are going to be released very, very soon that you won't want to miss. And we're everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, Threads. You can email us if you have any questions or thoughts. And make sure you're subscribed to our podcast feed wherever you listen, so that you don't miss a future episode.
And thanks also very kindly to our patrons. They are Brian, Ben, Cheryl, Clay, David, Emma, Jennifer, Katie, Knights of Ren, Leanne, Logan, Lucy, Lindsay, Matthew, Nathan, Nicole, Rob, Ruth, Santa, Skytalkers, Tom, Travis, and our newest patron, Krista. Thank you all so much for your support to help keep the lights on here at Friends of the Force. We are very grateful. And if you have spent 2 hours with us yapping, thanks. It's appreciated. Hope you're having a lovely day and staying hydrated, because this is the coldest summer we're going to get for the rest of our lives. Ha! Yay!
True. Also, this episode made me extremely thirsty. So that's a good point. Hydrate. Stay safe out there. Stay cool. Thank you all again for listening. And until next time, may the Force be with you always.
Bye!